sure who actually was going to come to this presentation. It's not a very exciting or sexy type of presentation because it's kind of the business side of things, and it's a lot of things that, as I've gone through this with a couple of people get a little scared. They get kind of turned off. They get kind of like overwhelmed, like deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh, these are all these things that you think about. There is a lot of information. I'm not going to try to go through everything because it's nearly impossible even for me to try to think of all these things, because how I came to learn all this stuff is just based upon my story and how I started. So this is the support group, nonprofit management. It's kind of the business side of giving back. It's an overview. It's the things to think about, even if you're not running a nonprofit. If you're just running a support group, there are things that you need to think about. As your support group gets bigger and bigger, you might find yourself that you are kind of running your own organization. You suddenly have all these members, you've got finances, they're doing all these things. Maybe it's time to really think about, okay, what's my umbrella kind of protection? Mm-hmm. There is risk. There is things to think about. There is insurance that you might need to consider. So these are all the things that I bring up. Whether or not they pertain to you, whether or not they are right for you to do, I can't tell you that. That's not my job. I will always tell you, seek professional guidance. Just like we seek for professional guidance for healthcare, seek professional guidance in business. Legal help cannot be understated. And there are different professions of legalities. There are publishing, business, nonprofit. I've sought help and paid for every single one of them, and it's never gone wrong. So it has always helped me, protected me, even if you're just paying for just an hour of just guidance to just know that you're doing things the right way from the beginning. It just helps you later so much. So we'll just kind of go through things. I would like to keep it kind of open dialogue. I don't want to sit here and just talk about things that really don't pertain to anybody, especially because there is a lot of information. So I am Kendra Myles. I am the executive director and founder of EDS Wellness. EDS Wellness is a small, growing nonprofit. We founded in 2016. I can't tell you I have billions of dollars and millions donated and doing all these things because I'm still in this journey. I'm like literally in the trenches. It has been a very long process. It is so hard. I didn't go nonprofit because there was a lot of time and there was a lot of research that went into me going nonprofit. I'm from a public health background, and I really didn't want to go nonprofit, to be honest with you. I knew all the red tape. I knew what would need it. I was like, can I do this a different way? Because I didn't want to be a Me Too organization. I wanted to make sure that it was really meeting a need, not just a need in my head, but a need for the community. Just because we feel there's a need doesn't mean we're meeting the needs of our community, right? Doesn't mean we'll be successful. Because at the end of the day, a business, even if you're looking at a nonprofit or even if it's a support group that you want to start that you think will help, if you think it's important but it's not meeting the needs of the community, where are you going to go? So understanding what the needs are and making sure that you're meeting the needs. And it's still, if you go nonprofit, it's still a business. You still have to think about the profit and how you're going to bring in money to get by, to succeed. So this is the presentation. Who I am, I told you, Kendra Myles. I'm a board certified patient advocate. I'm a certified health education specialist, which is my certification associated with a public health degree. I'm also a yoga instructor. I'm also a restorative exercise specialist. I have 3 babies. My oldest one is now almost 6 feet. I've been married for over 16 years. To my husband, we have 2 dogs. I helped publish Dr. Afrin's book. I have a small publishing company to meet a need. I have 2 small companies on the side. I did have a medical sales company that I basically helped fund EDS Wellness and kind of all the projects that I did. And then I started a media publishing to help protect myself when I publish, but also to meet the needs of other providers that wanted to publish in the medical world. I'm a co-author of a kids book that's going to come out. I also was the co-author and publisher of Our Stories of Strength, Living with EDS, that came out in 2015. I was in pharmaceutical and medical sales, book publishing. I've done Wellapalooza Integrative Wellness conferences. I've spoken different places. I've done CME learning conferences for providers. Used to volunteer with EDNF, guest speaker, and I'm also a patient. And again, a mom. All 3 of my kids are hypermobile. I don't know if they have EDS. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Presentation objectives, we won't go through everything. Like I said, there's a lot of information. Definition of support group, why support groups are important, the legalities, support group or nonprofit, fundraising, establishing leadership, responsible advocacy, industry communication considerations, community considerations, events, communication, what to do now, first steps to starting a nonprofit, resources for leadership support, and LEGALITIES, which is a conference in 2 weeks that Amanda and I are both speaking at, and that's for anybody that is really involved in advocacy, nonprofits, support groups. It's a program that you can come to in person or online, and it's free. We're doing it with EDS awareness. So definition of a support group: a group of people with common experiences or concerns who provide each other with encouragement, comfort, and advice. I think this applies to nonprofits as well. Nonprofits can be support groups, right? So why are support groups important? Living with chronic pain is one of the hardest things that many of us can do on a daily basis. Living with pain while coping with a multi-systemic condition, such as the ones that we all know and deal with, is really challenging. It's really hard to get updated, reputable medical information and just to access knowledgeable providers, right? Additionally, individuals are often looking for ongoing support, including needs-specific help, finding solutions, or general connection to others who understand. Some of the most and the best approaches for managing life are life hacks to be used at home or to help yourself when needed, tips on behavior modification strategies and lifestyle changes to help you restore function and live well, and establishing a support group network. This is why support groups can help and why they're important. Whether it's a local support group, an online support group, or a nonprofit, this all applies, in my opinion. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Additions? So this is just types of support groups. Again, goes back to what are the types of support groups? Nonprofits apply, I put them at the end. So it could be in person, it could be virtual, like your Facebook, Inspire. It could be app or website based, like Backpack Health or Inspire. Those are different than even Facebook, in my opinion. Meetups, people have meetups. I'm sure you've heard of meetups. That's kind of more specific to an activity. Support group related events like social dinners that are kind of outside of a support group meeting. You got your nonprofits. You also got your professional networks and organizations that are kind of outside our chronic illness community. Anybody have any other additions, other types of support groups that I can think about? No. All right. So getting started. So the business considerations, again, applies to either nonprofits or your support group. Do you do it in person, virtual, or both? If you do things that are in person, and you meet in person, are you going to offer virtual attendance? What kind of considerations do you have to think about for privacy and protecting people and your members? Your mission and vision, where are you going to hold it? You're going to hold it in person. If you're going to offer also virtual attendance, how are you going to do that? So your venue, both in person and online, is important. Support group team, establishing a team, or your team for a nonprofit is huge. So your team for a nonprofit, if we're talking about a nonprofit, is your board of directors, and I'll go into that in just a minute. Down, accessibility. Accessibility also applies in person or online. So in person, can people get to it if they can't drive? Do they have to climb stairs? Is there an elevator? Any visual concerns, audio concerns? Same applies online. If it's virtual, what if people can't see? What if they can't hear? Are you going to offer transcripts? How are they going to be able to interact? I don't have all the solutions for that because I know transcription is one of those things. There's all these services that you just think about, but accessibility is important, not just physically. Materials, making sure that you know where your materials are and keeping them organized. How are you going to organize them? Having a binder is really important. That's just one of the suggestions that comes up a lot, but also organizing your content, maybe online or in a cloud, but at some point you're going to have to start paying for storage. How are you going to pay for that? It all costs money eventually. Not everything is free. There are great resources for nonprofits. But again, if you're just a support group, not just a support group, how do you access those benefits? Costs and budget is important. How are you going to keep that together? Privacy and confidentiality. This is a big one. I think there's so much information. I literally even just, I put all my stuff there, and then I'm researching and trying to make sure that what I'm saying is pertinent and it's not just in my head. Everything that you find online, there are so many great resources. Everything talks about confidentiality of your members. And that's so important. That's so important virtually and in person. And I don't know all the answers for all of that, but how are you going to do that? Are people going to sign waivers? How are you going to communicate with them? Do they want you to communicate to them? Do they want you to share in a public listserv, where everybody can see their emails? I don't know. So there's just all these different things to think about, and confidentiality of the members, not just in person, it's not just in person, but it's also online. And that's, I know, something that comes up a lot. So that might be something to think about if you are running a support group, just to do a query. How do you want us to communicate with you? If they put down their personal information, do you want all members to know your information? They might not. Insurance and legal, like I just said, is think about insurance. Legalities, making sure that you have waivers if you need to sign waivers, participant waivers, photography and video waivers. It's a lot of information. It can be quite overwhelming. But it's important to think about because not everybody wants to be in a support group picture. They don't want their picture posted online. You have to ask. You have to know what your limitations are and what people want to do. They might not even know or think about this stuff until they're in it. So bringing it up as an open conversation to your support group or your nonprofit, whatever it is, to make sure that you understand how the community wants to communicate and how they want to handle their participation is so important. I always put it back to, what do you guys want? How do you want me to handle this? How can I do better? Being respectful of everybody's choices. And they might not really know right away. A lot of times you don't know until you're in this situation how you want to handle things, whether, again, online or in person. Insurance, this is a big one. I'm a big insurance fan, I'm a big legal fan. But there are insurance things that you don't even think about. Professional liability. What is professional liability? People think if it's just for doctors. No, it's for all of us. The professional liability can be also different than general liability. General liability is kind of a broader kind of, if somebody gets hurt in your venue, correct me if I'm wrong. Professional liability is an issue with me, or an issue with you, or an issue with the leader, and it protects me and what I'm doing according to my profession. General liability is for your general, and you're protecting kind of your group in a place if somebody gets hurt. There's also what they call social services liability. That's for like organizations that, and for support groups, that if you're doing a service where, and I'll go to the next one. Well, I'll talk about social services in just a minute. But anyway, the second one is ground rules, establishing your ground rules and how you're going to operate your organization. All right, so this is where I have the quote. So social services, this is not actually where it has the quote, but talks about the insurance is not necessarily sexy, but it's an essential roof over your head. A lot of times nonprofits and support groups, they don't think about these things until you're in the situation. But I like this comment. It came from Blue Avocado. If anybody wants a referral list or places to look for insurance, I can tell you. It's not sexy, but it's essentially the roof of your head. So
it could be more important than the structure of the company too.
Yeah. So all things to consider, not to it's one of those things. There's a lot of information, and it's going to be a lot to digest. It might not pertain to support groups. But again, it depends on what your goal is. Where are you going? Are you starting with a nonprofit? Are you starting with a support group and you eventually want to go nonprofit? How are you going to do that? And these are things to consider. And if you're just going to be a support group, does the venue where you're going require you to have insurance? They might not, but maybe they don't. But do you actually think that you personally need it, or do you want to have it? It's just different things to think about. Okay, so legalities insurance, we've talked a lot about that. It's just, if you're going to decide that you want to have some kind of umbrella, okay, I'm in a support group, or I want to start a nonprofit. What do I do? What's the kind of bigger organization? It's a lot of business stuff. So what do you do? What are the steps? You first have to incorporate through your state. The state of Maryland is different than the state of Virginia. It's different than DC. So I can't tell you exactly what to do. I just know that you have to go into your business and you have to incorporate in the state. I'd incorporate as a nonprofit organization for EDS Wellness in the state of Maryland. For my LLCs, I incorporate in the state of Maryland as an LLC. Sometimes you can incorporate as a LLC and not necessarily a tax-exempt organization. You can still do service, but not be a nonprofit. I'm not going to go into all of that. There's a lot of details. There's costs associated with it. If you're going to incorporate, it's probably about $275. I think nonprofits are a little bit higher. Pros versus con, again, the insurance. Support group venue, does the support group venue require insurance? Do you personally need insurance? Why or why not? Again, privacy or confidentiality. HIPAA, I brought this up, we don't have to go into it, but it's just one of those things. Does HIPAA apply here with support groups? I'm not going to We can argue that. I don't really know that it does, but maybe it will eventually. I don't know. Do you need HIPAA training? I know that I had to go through HIPAA training as a medical sales. In medical sales, I have to go through all this stuff to just walk into a hospital and deal with providers and patients. I don't know that support groups ever will. They may, but in a lot of times you'll still be privy of medical information. Okay, so nonprofit affiliations. So does everybody know what a nonprofit affiliation is? So a nonprofit affiliation is if you are a support group and say you don't want to go nonprofit yourself, but you want to affiliate with a nonprofit. These are all different, and every nonprofit affiliation is a little bit different. So what I'm seeing here is not going to apply to other ones. These are just questions and things to consider. So there's nonprofit support groups. There's chapters. Chapters are different than support groups in the eyes of legal and also in the times of insurance. If there's a nonprofit chapter, the nonprofit has to incorporate in that state in order to have a chapter. A support group doesn't. So if I incorporate EDS Wellness in Wisconsin and they want to be a chapter, let's just say, I have to incorporate in the state of Wisconsin, and then that they also have their own insurance and everything that also applies. What are the benefits to nonprofit affiliations? If you are a support group, you can sometimes get insurance. Sometimes they give you a speaker stipend. There might be more educational materials. You have access to providing resources to your community. That's huge. You also have more umbrella support. Some possible conflicts might be that you might not be able to talk about all conditions, especially if you're dealing with multiple conditions. Some nonprofits, if they run it, however they run affiliations, they want to make sure that they control, from a legal purpose probably, I don't know, that you don't cross lines or gray areas with comorbid conditions. Is it restrictive if you have an affiliation? I don't know. Can't tell you. These are just all things to think about. You have to think about how you want to run your group. And that also applies to other nonprofits and affiliations with nonprofit to nonprofit. Maintaining autonomy. Let's see what our time is, because I'll go over the top points. Okay, so 10:25. Okay, so I'm just going to flip through this and we're going to get to the key points. What do you guys, are you mostly interested in support group management or actually like steps to starting a nonprofit? What are like the biggest key points or interests? Support group management? Okay. So then we'll just flip through this and we'll just go to the points again. Maintaining autonomy. This is associated with affiliations. But if you want to maintain autonomy, because you want to talk about overlapping conditions, overlapping interests. You have no restrictions. It's member controlled and owned, and it's kind of, then you have to maybe consider more of these business considerations that I talked about before if you're going to maintain autonomy. Some of these business considerations might then apply to you if you don't have the kind of umbrella protection affiliation of a nonprofit. Again, insurance, legal needs. I have to go into that more. Funding and fundraising, support group meeting costs. It all costs money, right? And you'd be really surprised, at least I am, that you find that you're doing all this, doing good, and you think everybody's going to donate and everybody's going to help. No. No. Printing costs a lot of money. People might have access to printing at their school, and they might offer you, but when you're printing 100 copies of something, that costs money. At some point, everybody's help eventually dies down. The novelty wears off, and you're sitting there by yourself going, great, what do I do? So the cost, it does cost. I was in this situation myself. I had done all this work for EDS Wellness. I purposely did all this work up front before I went nonprofit so that I had a reputation. I had a support group. I had work behind me to prove what I was going to do and that I was going to meet a need and fill a niche that wasn't being met. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'll put all my, not all my money, but I invested my own personal money into it. And then guess what? My business partner stopped paying me. So my money, my donation, ended. So here I had this nonprofit that was bigger than me, and I had done all this work, and I thought, okay, here I am. But now my funding, my personal donation to help it go was gone. Well, guess what? Not a lot of people want to donate for a wellness-focused nonprofit. I'm not finding a gene. I'm not research for the cure, but I'm trying to help people live well and restore function. And it's important, and I've done a lot of work, and it is work that people want, but it's not work that necessarily everybody wants to, is like running to donate for. So how do I keep going? My website is $100 a month, my insurance is $225 a month, printing costs, well, forget it, that's not even part of the budget. I'm just trying to keep things, sustained. And at this point, my husband is like, no more. He's like, we have done, donated and then some to this. He's like, that's it. So now here I am, done all this work. I want to keep working on. I still have to work outside. I still have 3 kids, and I have been married, and my husband's like, we've done enough, Kendra. We've sacrificed enough. What do you do? So funding and costs, whether even for a little bit, every $5 that you have to pay out of your pocket when you don't have it, or it's the difference between your money and putting food on your kid's table or paying for your medicine, it matters. I never thought that I would get to that position, but I did. And I'm there every month right now. It's so stressful. And you will at some point get to that point. I hope that nobody ever does, but I think every organization, even nonprofit, gets to the point where the struggle, the rubber meets the pavement. I mean, you got all this adrenaline, you keep going, and it just gets to the point where the novelty wears off, the excitement wears off, and you're kind of sitting there going, okay, I've got all these people to serve. How do I keep going? So it's not just the cost perspective, but the cost perspective adds up into how are you going to keep going, the self-funded member donations. Can you accept member donations if you are a support group? I don't know, because people want to be able to write it off, but if they can't, if you're not affiliated with a nonprofit, can they do that? Are there any possible conflicts of interest? And can you use a 501c3? You can't. You can't just use a 501c3 tax ID because you serve that condition. You can't just say, well, I'm serving EDS, so I'm going to use, EDS awareness is tax ID. You can't do that. If you're going to use the tax ID and say that you're going to donate to us because we serve this condition, just because you serve this condition doesn't mean that you can use a nonprofit's tax ID. And maybe nobody in this room would think about that, but that's happened. So that does happen. People just rightfully want to help, and they think because they're doing a support group and because they are helping with a condition that they can just kind of solicit funds under the nonprofit because they're serving the community, but you can't. Anything else comes up? Establishing teamwork and barriers. So again, we're talking to people more concerned about support group management. Establishing your team up front, again, because when the rubber meets the pavement and you're really tired and funding is stressful and you're trying to figure out that, you need help. You need, who's your team? Who you're going to lean on? Because again, that's also the novelty that ends up wearing off, and then you end up doing everything and you're tired and you've got work to do and you've got a family to raise and you can't put in all your time, and then all of a sudden you've got not only to run the support group and do it, but like all the work behind it, the communication. The members are calling you, they need needs. Who's going to manage the phone? Do you give your phone number out? You need to establish barriers and put your team. 5 minutes? Okay. There's a lot of information.
Can we talk to you later?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a whole thing. So, you know what? We have 5 minutes, so I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm just going to flip to the 5 key points at the end, and then you guys can ask me questions because there is just so much, like I said, information. Support group communication. Okay. So this is what I said. I've already got us started a support group. Now what do I do? You've brought up all these things. What do we do? Just step back and review the information. Focus on what's pertinent to you and your group. Assess personal and professional need for insurance. I can't answer that. You might not need it. I don't know. This is where the social services definition was. Social services professional coverage is for errors and omissions that could arise in the course of carrying out the missions, providing counseling, advice, and support groups, and so forth. So that's pretty. You guys can read that. I'll take questions, thoughts. You guys can ask me anything afterwards. Feedback. I wasn't, we were really not sure exactly what to focus on in this presentation, and it was whether it's support groups or whether it was nonprofits. What would people be really interested in? Sometimes that there's a gray area. Sometimes there's kind of, well, do I do this? Do I not? You are a support group that's kind of like a nonprofit thing. How do you operate it? How do you manage it? And when do you know it? So I think the best thing is understand that it's a journey. You learn a lot of these things as you're going. I'm still in it, like I said. But knowing when it may be time to really consider establishing a more formal organization, if you are just in a support group, just so that you have kind of an umbrella type of organization. You know, you can get big enough where you're kind of running like an organization, and having some kind of protection structure above you might be what you need to do. I'm not saying it's a nonprofit. You could do an LLC, you know, and that's important to you. But that means if you do an LLC, what that means is that you say, I'm going to do, you know, support group N is your name. If somebody has an issue and they want to sue you, and they sue support group N versus you as the person, it separates you from the organization.
Except in cases of personal liability. That's why insurance is so important.
Exactly. So, and again, this stuff is so, there's all these but ifs and there's all these things, and I have a lot of insurance policies that I carry, a lot of different ones. I don't just have directors and operators for EDS Wellness. I have volunteer, I have driving, I have professional liability for my doctors, I have professional liability for me, I have professional liability for me outside of EDS Wellness. I have everything. Yoga insurance, I've got everything. And my fear is that, you know, you just never know. So yes, so at some point you just kind of think to yourself, okay, what are we doing? What do we need? I can't answer that for you. It might not apply. It might not be important. But just things to be aware of and consider, especially in this day and age. And actually, I'm not the only person talking about this. There are a lot more articles talking about this. So
I'm a support group that is working towards becoming a nonprofit. Because along with doing support group meetings, we do a lot of community events. And like you said, funding for printing costs is a huge
well, and you
problem.
need insurance for those events. You
Well,
can't just
and that's
hold
what I
it.
was just going to ask you is I've never covered insurance for any of those events. So how do you go about doing that? What kind of an insurance agent is that you would
That
contact?
is a big thing. So if you want to go do, like my first event I ever did was EDS Ride for the Cause. It was not benefiting my organization. I won't tell you whose organization it was benefiting, but it was benefiting another EDS organization. At that time, I didn't have insurance. I didn't need to. I wasn't actually a formal organization, but I had an LLC. So I had my own insurance, but the event also had insurance, and they didn't require me to have insurance. At this point now, going back, I would have had insurance for that event. And at the time, the nonprofit that I did it for didn't have insurance covering me or that event either. So how do you go about it and doing it? There are insurance providers and brokers that specialize in nonprofit support group insurance. I can give you several links. There's
wonderful.
Blue Avocado is one of them. The insurance provider that I use, the broker, is called Insurance for Nonprofits. I love them. I can't tell you how great they are.
It's not super expensive. Day of insurance usually isn't super expensive.
Yeah,
It's
and
maybe
what's important for to understand too is that when you do talk to an insurance provider, whatever it is, they can help you with these different types of insurance. So it's not like you have to go through one place for events or one place. So your general liability, if you have a general liability policy, will usually protect an event. Now, if that event is outside of a state, you might have to have a special rider for certain events. Like I have certain riders for certain events, for teaching yoga classes online. Like I have a special rider for teaching you guys just 5 minutes on EDS as well as this Facebook page. So
How about like if you were like we're doing an awareness event at a state house? Is that something?
that's why going through, like anytime I do anything, I call my insurance broker and be like, okay, I'm doing this event. Do I need an extra rider? What kind of forms do I need? A lot of times they want to see it on the website. So you just have to ask them. So the best thing you can do is have an insurance provider. You establish having insurance. If they're working with just nonprofits, they will tell you what you need and don't need, and they will tell you the price.
Okay.
They will also tell you what kind of policies either cover an event or not. And like I said, sometimes you actually need a special rider for certain events, which it means it's just like an addendum. So, but that just covers the event. You know, there's also directors and operators insurance and emissions and errors and things like that. But these providers, these brokers are so critical for helping you understand the different types of policies and whether or not you need it. Driving, there's special driving policies too. Like if you're driving to and from a meeting or an event, or your volunteers are and they get in an accident, their insurance might not cover that. I mean, I don't know. So there are, these little things that you can add, these little policies, at the very least, don't usually add up too much, but that's why an insurance broker is really important. So insurance for nonprofits, you don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit. If you're just a support group, you can call them. They have social services. they have professional liability, they can tell you the differences, how much they cost, and what you need for that specific event, and whether you need anything extra.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Kendra.
A lot of information. So.